Tonight we're getting answers to a question many of you might have had after a story we aired last night. We told you how a judge in Washington County dismissed 3 cases against James Martin of Northern Build Pros Incorporated. He was charged with home improvement fraud after prosecutors say he did not do work that he was paid tens of thousands of dollars to do. But the judge says Vermont's law violates the 13th Amendment's prohibition against indentured servitude. I wanted to know why and what your options are.
Involuntary servitude is this idea that you say, you have to keep working for me because you owe me money.
Vermont Law School professor and constitutional law expert Jared Carter tells me the judge's ruling hinges on the fact that Vermont's home improvement law statute, which was amended in 2015, doesn't require that prosecutors prove the contractor intended to defraud the homeowner.
Pretty much every crime requires some proof of intent.
Without that, he says Vermont's law essentially punishes someone for their inability to pay a debt.
So it doesn't say that you cannot criminalize this at all. It just says that to be consistent with the Constitution, there's a higher bar. And I think that makes some sense. Even if there is this rampant problem, we still have to have laws that comply with the Constitution, even if it makes things more difficult.
But he says this ruling does not let contractors take your money and walk away. You can still sue them in civil court for breach of contract and get damages. But that can also be a frustrating process for homeowners.
It can be very hard to actually enforce a civil judgment, especially if we're talking about a contractor or somebody who is essentially bankrupt and has no money. It can be very hard to make the homeowner whole. So that's a very legitimate concern.
He says if lawmakers wanted stricter penalties for unfinished work, they could amend the law to add the intent element back in. And they could also create new civil penalties for contractors who don't hold up their end of the deal.
The legislature is going to have to do something if this is a priority for it.
And we are still working to figure out what this ruling means for the dozens of home improvement fraud convictions in Vermont under this law over the last decade. It's also possible that the Vermont Attorney General's office could appeal this decision to the Vermont Supreme Court. The AG's office today told me they're reviewing the ruling and considering their options. They also remind homeowners they have a home improvement specialist on staff at the Consumer Assistance Program whose job it is to mediate complaints like this. We have that number on our website with this story. If you have a question you want answered, send us a note at gettinganswers@wcax.com.